The first temple, also known as Solomon's Temple, holds profound significance in religious history, intertwining themes from Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Here is an extensive overview. King Solomon commissioned the first temple's construction in the 10th century BCE in Jerusalem, aiming to create a centralized place of worship for the Israelites. This temple symbolized the covenant between God and Israel, and served as the primary location for religious rituals. The Ark of the Covenant, a sacred chest housing the stone tablets of the Ten Commandments, was placed within the temple's innermost sanctuary, the Holy of Holies. This placement underscored the temple's role as the dwelling place of God's presence among his people. Destruction of the first temple. In 586 BCE, the Babylonian army, under King Nebuchadnezzar II, besieged Jerusalem, leading to the temple's destruction. This event marked a pivotal moment in Jewish history, resulting in the Babylonian exile. The Talmud notes that the temple was set ablaze on the 9th day of a date that has since become a day of mourning in Judaism. The fate of the Ark post-destruction remains a subject of speculation and mystery. Some traditions suggest it was hidden to prevent its capture, while others believe it was taken or destroyed during the Babylonian conquest. The Second Temple, constructed upon the Jewish people's return from exile, did not house the Ark, Jesus, and Christianity. In Christian theology, Jesus is seen as fulfilling the temple's purpose, representing God's presence on earth. Prophecies in the New Testament, such as those in the Book of Revelation, allude to end-time events involving a temple in Jerusalem. Some interpretations suggest the construction of a third temple as a precursor to these events, though perspectives vary among scholars. Islamic significance and the Dome of the Rock. Following the Islamic conquest of Jerusalem in the 7th century CE, the Dome of the Rock was constructed on the Temple Mount site. Completed in 691 to 692 CE under Caliph Abed, this shrine is believed to enshrine the rock from which Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven during the night journey. The site holds profound significance in Islam and stands as an architectural and spiritual landmark in Jerusalem. Recent discoveries and ongoing mysteries. Archaeological endeavors continue to shed light on the temple's history. A notable discovery includes a 3,000-year-old pagan shrine near the Temple Mount, believed to have been sealed during King Hezekiah's religious reforms. This finding offers insights into the region's religious practices and transformations. Additionally, declassified documents have surfaced, suggesting that in 1988, a CIA remote viewing session purportedly confirmed the existence of the Ark of the Covenant. The session described the Ark as being guarded by powerful entities in an undisclosed Middle Eastern location. However, these claims lack physical evidence and are met with skepticism. The Temple Mount remains a focal point of religious significance and contention, symbolizing the intertwined histories and beliefs of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The mosque on the Temple Mount, known today as Al-Aqsa Mosque, along with the nearby Dome of the Rock, was built by early Muslim leaders, rulers of Islam. Here's the simple and true reason why it was built there, on the Temple Mount. Religious significance in Islam. The site is called Al-Haram al-Sharif in Islam. Muslims believe that the Prophet Muhammad was taken on a miraculous night journey from Mecca to Jerusalem, and ascended to heaven from that exact spot, the rock beneath the Dome of the Rock. This made the site the third holiest in Islam, after Mecca and Medina. Historical context. In 638 CE, Muslim forces under Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab peacefully took control of Jerusalem. Soon after, Umar built a small prayer structure on the site. In 691 CE, Caliph Abd al-Malik built the Dome of the Rock, and later his son Al-Walid the First built the Al-Aqsa Mosque. These buildings were meant to honor the spot of Muhammad's ascension and to establish a monumental presence in a city sacred to Jews and Christians. Why that exact location? Muslims knew the site was also important to Jews, but at the time, it had been abandoned and in ruins. Building there showed respect for the sanctity of the site and also helped solidify Islamic spiritual and political presence in Jerusalem. The Isra and Mi'raj are two distinct parts of a miraculous event in Islamic tradition that happened to the Prophet Muhammad in one night. It is considered one of the most significant events in Islamic history. While the Isra involves a physical journey, the Mi'raj is a spiritual ascent that Muslims believe took place. But it is important to note that the Mi'raj is not considered a dream, but a divinely guided, supernatural journey. Let's break this down and explore it in more detail. The Isra, the journey. According to Islamic belief, one night, the Prophet Muhammad was taken from Mecca to Jerusalem in a miraculous way, on a special steed called. The journey was incredibly fast and supernatural. It's said to be a journey that would normally take months, but Muhammad made it in a single night. Al-Aqsa Mosque. Muhammad's journey ends in Jerusalem, at the site of Al-Aqsa Mosque. This is significant because Al-Aqsa is the third holiest site in Islam. The mosque stands on the Temple Mount, which was also sacred to Jews and Christians. Prophet's role. In Jerusalem, Muhammad is said to have led a prayer with all the previous prophets of Judaism and Christianity, before ascending to the heavens. The Mi'raj, the ascent. After Muhammad's night journey to Jerusalem, he ascended to the heavens in a miraculous way. This is the Mi'raj. This part of the event is not just a dream or a vision, but is believed to be a real spiritual and physical ascent. The seven heavens. Muhammad ascended through seven heavens, where he encountered several prophets. Jesus predicted the destruction of the Second Temple in Jerusalem in several places in the New Testament. This prophecy is significant because it was fulfilled in 70 CE, when the Romans destroyed the Second Temple. Let's explore how Jesus predicted this event and why he said it would happen. Jesus' prediction of the temple's destruction. The Gospel of Matthew. Jesus left the temple and was walking away when his disciples came up to him to call his attention to its buildings. "Do you see all these things?" he asked. "Truly, I tell you, not one stone here will be left on another. Every one will be thrown down." The Gospel of Mark. As Jesus was leaving the temple, one of his disciples said to him, "Look, teacher, what massive stones, what magnificent buildings." "Do you see all these great buildings?" replied Jesus. "Not one stone here will be left on another. Every one will be thrown down." The Gospel of Luke. Some of his disciples were remarking about how the temple was adorned with beautiful stones and with gifts dedicated to God. But Jesus said, "As for what you see here, the time will come when not one stone will be left on another. Every one of them will be thrown down." Why did Jesus predict the temple's destruction? There are several reasons why Jesus predicted the destruction of the Second Temple, and it ties into his broader mission and message. Condemnation of the temple's corruption. Jesus was critical of how the temple had become a place of corruption, exploitation, and ritualism rather than true worship of God. In the Gospels, we see Jesus cleansing the temple by driving out money changers and merchants. He saw the temple as being turned into a den of thieves, where the focus had shifted from genuine spiritual devotion to commercialism and exploitation. Luke 19:46. It is written, "My house will be a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of robbers." Judgment on Israel's rejection of the Messiah. Jesus often spoke about the rejection of him as the Messiah by the Jewish people, especially by the religious leaders of the time. He predicted the consequences of this rejection. Luke 19:41-44. Jesus weeps over Jerusalem and predicts its destruction. As he approached Jerusalem and saw the city, he wept over it and said, "If you, even you, had only known on this day what would bring you peace, but now it is hidden from your eyes. The days will come upon you when your enemies will build an embankment against you, and encircle you and hem you in on every side. They will dash you to the ground, and the children within your walls will be thrown to the ground. They will not leave one stone on another, because you did not recognize the time of God's coming to you." Jesus wept because the people of Jerusalem did not recognize him as the Messiah, and their rejection would lead to the city's destruction, a prophetic sign of judgment. Jesus saw the destruction of the temple as a divine judgment for the way Israel had failed to live according to God's will. The temple, which had been the center of Jewish worship and the symbol of God's presence among his people, would be destroyed as a sign of God's judgment on their spiritual state. End times prophecy. Jesus also associated the destruction of the temple with future end times events, in which there would be tribulation and upheaval. In the Olivet Discourse, Jesus discusses the signs of the end of the age, including wars, famines, persecutions, and the destruction of the temple as one of the beginning signs of the end. Matthew 24:2-3. Do you see all these things? Truly I tell you, not one stone will be left here upon another. All will be thrown down. As he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us, when will this be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" Why was the temple destroyed in 70 CE? The Second Temple was destroyed by the Romans in 70 CE during the Roman-Jewish War. This event fulfilled Jesus' prophecy and can be understood in several ways. Roman siege of Jerusalem. In 66 CE, the Jewish people rebelled against Roman rule, leading to a prolonged siege of Jerusalem. The Romans, led by the future Emperor Titus, besieged the city and eventually destroyed the Second Temple in 70 CE. As part of their conquest, the destruction of the temple marked the end of the Jewish sacrificial system and the loss of the central place of worship for the Jewish people. Fulfillment of Jesus' prophecy. Prophecy about the temple's destruction was seen as being fulfilled in this historical event. The Romans destroyed the temple as part of their conquest, leaving no stone left upon another. This event was viewed as a divine judgment on the Jewish rejection of Jesus and the spiritual state of the people at that time. A new covenant. In Christian theology, the destruction of the Second Temple symbolizes the end of the Old Covenant with Israel and the beginning of the New Covenant in Christ. The temple, which represented the presence of God among the people, was no longer needed, as Christians believe that Jesus himself became the new temple, the way through which people can access God. John 2:19-21. Jesus answered them, "Destroy this temple, and I will raise it again in 3 days." But the temple he had spoken of was his body. This refers to Jesus' own death and resurrection, which Christians believe inaugurated a new relationship with God. Jesus predicted the destruction of the Second Temple as part of his larger prophetic message about judgment, the rejection of God's messenger, and the spiritual state of Israel. Reasons for the destruction. Jesus condemned the corruption in the temple and Israel's rejection of him as the Messiah. It was also a symbol of divine judgment and a sign of the changing relationship between God and the people of Israel. The Romans destroyed the temple in 70 CE, fulfilling Jesus' prophecy. In Christian theology, the destruction of the temple is seen as a symbol of the end of the Old Covenant and the establishment of a new covenant through Jesus. The question of whether Israel will build the Third Temple in Jerusalem is a complex and controversial issue with deep religious, historical, and political implications. Religious significance of the Third Temple. Why some believe the Third Temple will be built. Biblical prophecy and Jewish tradition. Many Jews believe that the Third Temple will be rebuilt as part of the fulfillment of biblical prophecies. According to Jewish tradition, the coming of the Messiah will coincide with the rebuilding of the Temple in Jerusalem. This is based on prophecies found in books like Ezekiel, Isaiah, and Zechariah, which speak about a future temple in the Messianic era. Ezekiel 40-48 describes a detailed vision of a third temple that will be constructed in the future. This is considered a key passage in the Jewish hope for the restoration of the temple and a return to the old worship practices, Christian beliefs, and the second coming of Christ. Some Christians also believe that the third temple will be built as part of the events leading up to the second coming of Christ. This is based on prophecies in the New Testament, particularly in the book of Revelation and the teachings of Jesus in Matthew 24 and Mark 30, which mention the desecration of a future temple by the Antichrist during the end times. Many Christians view the building of a third temple as a sign that the end of the world is approaching and that the Messiah will return to restore peace and righteousness. Modern Jewish movements. Some Jewish religious groups, such as the Temple Institute in Jerusalem, actively advocate for the rebuilding of the temple. They believe that it is a key step in the spiritual redemption of the Jewish people and the arrival of the Messiah. These groups are even working on constructing items needed for the temple, such as the altar, menorah, and priestly garments. Why some believe the third temple will not be built. Theological interpretation in Judaism. Some Jewish scholars interpret the rebuilding of the temple as not being necessary for the coming of the Messiah. Instead, they believe that the Messiah will come and bring peace and redemption without the need for a physical temple. This view is more prevalent among Rabbinic Judaism and is seen as part of a broader spiritual redemption, not one that requires rebuilding a physical structure. Christian views on the temple. Many Christian denominations do not see the rebuilding of the third temple as a necessary precursor to the return of Christ. They interpret biblical prophecies symbolically rather than literally, and believe that Jesus' death and resurrection already fulfilled the need for a temple as the ultimate sacrifice and intercession. For these Christians, the idea of a new temple is not necessary in God's divine plan. Political and practical reasons why the third temple might be built. Nationalism and Jewish sovereignty. In modern Israel, there are some who believe that the rebuilding of the temple would mark the fulfillment of Israel's national destiny and signify the final step in restoring Jewish sovereignty in the land of Israel. These ideas are linked to Zionism, the movement for the return of Jews to their ancestral homeland, and some proponents view the temple as an important symbol of Jewish identity and religious heritage. Political will and movements. In recent years, there has been an increasing call among certain segments of the Israeli population to restore the temple. This is partly driven by a nationalistic movement, along with the desire to assert Jewish religious rights over the Temple Mount, which is currently under the control of the Muslim world. While the Israeli government has not officially pursued the construction of a new temple, some political groups in Israel see it as a symbol of Jewish rights to the Temple Mount and the historical connection to the site. Why the third temple might not be built. Religious conflict. The Temple Mount is one of the most sensitive religious sites in the world. It is the location of the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock, which are considered the third holiest sites in Islam. Any attempt to build a Jewish temple on this site would likely spark intense conflict with the Muslim world and lead to violent protests or even wars. The status quo at the Temple Mount is an incredibly sensitive issue, and many Muslim and Palestinian leaders would fiercely oppose any attempt to rebuild the Jewish temple. Additionally, many Jews are hesitant to take action that would potentially desecrate or disrupt the site. especially considering the traditional belief that the temple should only be rebuilt when the Messiah comes. Political and diplomatic considerations. The Israeli government is aware of the immense political and diplomatic consequences of such an action. Rebuilding the temple could undermine Israel's standing in the international community and escalate tensions in the already volatile Middle East. The political leadership of Israel has generally avoided any moves to take steps toward rebuilding the temple for fear of sparking a wider conflict. Lack of religious consensus. There is no unified consensus, even within the Jewish community, about the need for the third temple. While some religious groups advocate for it, many others believe it is unnecessary or will only happen when the Messiah comes. Without broad support among the Jewish people, it would be difficult for any movement to succeed in rebuilding the temple. Moreover, many Jews believe that the first and second temples were destroyed as part of divine judgment for Israel's disobedience, and they believe that the third temple will only be rebuilt by God at the time of messianic redemption, rather than by human effort. Conclusion. Arguments for the temple being built. Religious prophecy and traditional beliefs in both Judaism and Christianity suggest the third temple will be built as part of the fulfillment of end-times prophecies. There are modern Jewish movements, and some Israeli groups, advocating for the restoration of the temple as a symbol of Jewish sovereignty and national destiny. Arguments against the temple being built. The political and religious conflict over the Temple Mount makes it highly unlikely that the Israeli government will pursue such a move. Religious divisions within Judaism and the Muslim world's control over the Temple Mount create significant barriers to the construction of a third temple. Many believe the temple will only be rebuilt when the Messiah comes, rather than through human effort. The rebuilding of the third temple remains a highly debated topic, with differing opinions among religious, political, and cultural groups. While there are groups actively working toward this goal, it faces significant political, religious, and social challenges, making it unclear whether it will ever come to fruition.